First of all, do we as human beings want to be really free from sorrow? Or we have never actually gone into it, faced it, and understand all the movement of it. What are the implications involved in it? Why human beings who have so extraordinarily clever in their technological world, why sorrow has never been resolved? I think it is important to talk it over together, this question, and to find out for ourselves whether sorrow can really end. We all suffer in different ways. There is the sorrow of death of someone. There is the sorrow of great poverty, which the East knows very well. Great sorrow of ignorance. We use the word ignorance in the sense not of book knowledge, but the ignorance of not knowing totally oneself. The whole complex activity of the self. And if we don't understand that very deeply, there is the sorrow of that ignorance. And there is the sorrow of never being able to realize something fundamentally deeply. Though we are very clever at achieving technological success and success in this world. And also, we have never been able to understand pain. Not only physical pain, but also the deep psychological pain. I'm sure, one is sure that one knows all these things. One is aware of all this. However learned or not very erudite, we know all these things. That there is personal sorrow of not being beautiful outwardly or inwardly. There is the sorrow of constant struggle, conflict, from the moment we are born till we die. There is the sorrow of attachment with its fear, with its corruption. And there is the sorrow of not being loved and asking, craving to be loved. And there is the sorrow of never realizing something beyond thought, that which is eternal. And ultimately, there is the sorrow of death. Now, we have described various forms of sorrow. And the factors of sorrow is the self-centered activity. Right? We are also concerned with ourselves, with our endless problems, with old age, not being able to have a global, deep inward outlook. And together this morning, can we go into it, not verbally, intellectually, but actually realize the sorrow that one has had or that one is having, and the sorrow of the whole world. Physical pain, one can understand, do something about it, and perhaps not register it, not record it. I do not know if you ever tried that. You may have had pain last week and finish that with that pain when that pain is over, not record it. That is possible. If you go into it very carefully, it is possible to have physical pain and end it the moment it is over, not carry the remembrance of it at all. It is possible. So that pain doesn't interfere or bring about neurotic activity in our daily life. And not make that as an excuse to hurt others. And we bear psychological pain. We all have, as we pointed out the other day, images of ourselves and about others. The brain is always active in either daydreaming, being occupied with something or other, or imagining, creating from that imagination pictures, ideas, and gradually from childhood one builds this structure of the image which is me. And each one of us is doing this constantly. And it is that image that gets hurt, which is me. Right? As we pointed out, when one is hurt, there is this resistance, which is building a wall around oneself and not to be hurt anymore, and therefore more fear and isolation and the feeling of having no relationship and encouraging loneliness, which brings about sorrow also. I hope we are together thinking, following this, and not merely listening to a series of words or ideas which will become rather boring. But if we actually see, aware that how this hurt, with all its consequences, is part of our life, and whether those wounds can ever disappear completely. Because if that doesn't disappear completely, it's part of our sorrow. Right? Are we following this? Are we thinking together? And there is this pain of isolation, separateness. Not only as a race, as a community, as a nation, but also isolating ourselves as an individual. And all the consequences, the travail, the misery of that individual. And our activity is always self-centered, which is one of the factors of isolation. Now, the question then is, after having described the various forms of sorrow, whether we can look at it without verbalization, without running away from it, or by intellectual adaptation to some other form of a religious or intellectual conclusion, but to look at it completely, not move away from it, stay with it. You understand? What we mean by that is, suppose I have a son who is deaf and dumb, who may die, and I am responsible because I have produced him. And it is sorrow, knowing that he can never look at the beautiful sky, never hear the running waters, and there is this sorrow. To remain with it, not move away from it. You understand? Are you following? That is, I have this great pain, this sorrow, either of his deformity or the death of someone with whom I have lived for many years, and the ending of that person. There is this sorrow. sorrow is the essence of isolation. Right? I wonder if you understand that. Right? When we are totally isolated, completely alone, and that feeling is sorrow. Now, to remain completely with that feeling, not verbalize it, rationalize it, escape from it, transcend it, all the movement that thought brings about. Are we meeting each other? So that when there is that sorrow, and when thought doesn't enter into it at all, which means that you are completely sorrow. Not that you are trying to overcome sorrow, you are totally sorrow. And when there is that totality of it, then there is the disappearance of it. It's only when there is fragmentation, then there is travail. You understand? Are we meeting each other? So when there is sorrow, to remain with it without a single movement of thought, and that the wholeness of it. The wholeness of sorrow. It's not that I am in sorrow, I am sorrow. So there is no fragmentation involved in sorrow. So when there is that totality of that, and there is no movement away from that, then there is the withering away of it. Right? Are we together in this?